Final segment of today's Sons of the Shoe podcast, and we're not going to do a full preview of the Outback Bowl, but we are going to take our first look
Cotton
at
Bowl.
that
Cotton
that
Bowl.
too. I don't know why, but I've been thinking Outback Bowl because maybe I need a bloomin' onion. I don't know, but
Maybe there's just such a disappointing season that you thought that's where Ohio State ended up. Like, oh
or
yeah, they just got the Outback Bowl. That honestly, the Outback Bowl is the bowl. I don't even think the Outback Bowl exists anymore, but that's the bowl that you think of when you had like a 10-2 season and you were like, yeah, it was all right, but that's the bowl you think of. Like, oh, my team's probably playing in the Outback Bowl. It's just the easy you know, main one of the major bowl games that comes to mind. 100%.
I feel like the winner in that game should just get like a 6 foot bloomin' onion that the whole team gets to like break down. It's the number one reason I go to Outback. That being said, we'll take a quick look at the Cotton Bowl here in a minute, but it is time for the Michigan Panic Meter. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think I'm staying in a light scarlet for just another week here, and I reserve the right to change if at any point either Dante Moore goes to Michigan, at which point the panic will recommence, or you land Riley Leonard, Cam Ward, Dante Moore, or somebody that we look at and say, this is somebody that can go ahead and change the fortunes of the program and be a true upgrade over Kyle McCord. How about you?
I'm standing the light scarlet as well. Based on our conversation last show, I know we talked a lot about the Jim Harbaugh potential contract extension and what that means. And just this idea that he might actually end up staying in Michigan because they had his back for once makes me a little bit worried. Granted, I know he'll be losing a lot of players, but it sounds like they're maybe going to go out in the portal like Ohio State and try to bring in some players. And yeah, I'm with you. Like if they land Dante Moore and they somehow mend fences on that tarnished relationship that they had during his recruiting tour the first time around, then that's not what you want to hear, especially depending on how it plays out with Ohio State and what quarterback they get as well.
So that brings us to the Cotton Bowl, and now I'm looking down at my notes to make sure I don't say Outback Bowl again. And there's a great quote by Eli Drinkwitz, and we're probably actually going to be using this later in the week to compare it to a move that he made, this season to kind of elevate the program. But the actual quote that really caught my eye was he said, coaching, 18 to 22-year-olds is 90% having your team motivated. And that's kind of how I look at this game for Ohio State. It's less you win and it erases Michigan, or you win and the team's in a perfect position, pie in the sky and all that crap. And a loss is the opposite. And it's more just, I think you get to see how motivated this team is to finish the season off strong. And that doesn't mean if they lose that Ryan Day doesn't have his guys in a row. Missouri's got more guys going into this game playing from their ninth ranked team than you've got going into your game. But at the same point, like I want to see Ohio State play hard. I want to see them fight to the end. And I want to see just, all right, how do the young guys play? How, do any of the transfers, the potential transfers play?
Yeah.
And based off that, like, I just think it's a nice way to wrap up a season that, other than one game, was actually pretty successful for Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm almost not worried about the results here. Like, I'm not going to sit here when we do a post game show together and rip Ryan Day up and down for decision making in this game or whatever. Like, I think this truly has become, given all the transfer portal guys, given that Kyle McCord's gone, moving on, etc. Like, I think it almost is just a game that sets the stage for, okay, what are things going to look like next year? Whether that means like Riley Leonard's the guy you land in the transfer portal and he's starting and you get a first look at him, or whether that means they're going to give Devin Brown a look or Keen Holtz a look or whatever. Like whatever their plan is, I think it's more so about that and seeing what the future kind of holds and, just kind of assessing the situation from here and getting these guys a real live experience in a bowl game than it is about what the result is. I do think, though, that quote from Drinkwitz is interesting because, one of the other calling cards, you obviously beating Michigan and winning national championship that Urban Meyer had, was that he rarely had players when the years they didn't make the playoff. He rarely had guys who wouldn't play in that game and as like sort of a final send off, even if they were ready to go to the NFL. Generally, they'd always play. generally they'd suit up for that game. They'd be ready to go. And generally he had them motivated to win that game, even though it had less stakes than making the playoff, which was obviously the ultimate goal for those teams. We'll see if that's the case with Ryan Day as well, where he has this guy supremely motivated to go out and win a game that really doesn't matter as much in the grand scheme of things because Ohio State's bar is the playoff. And I think that's kind of telling as well. I also just think that quote's telling to, well, I've heard so much lately about just how you coach kids today based on what coaches used to do, and how like this Bill Belichickian mentality of just like ripping guys isn't going to work. It doesn't work anymore. And it's less about like telling, I think the line is like, you don't tell players today what they did wrong. You tell them what you want them to do. And I think that kind of plays into that as well. It's like, yeah, I'm here to motivate these guys. They're seeing stuff on social media and all these different platforms now that are getting into their psyche. And I got to kind of get through all that, make them understand like that they're valued, and then get them to perform on the field. Like, I think it's a really well said quote. And I love Drinkwitz. I think everything he's got a great sense of humor. He seems like he's a great coach and a great guy. And I thought that was a pretty, meaningful quote for the way that he's supposed to do his job in 2023.
I still haven't forgiven him for how he treated App State, one of my favorite programs, as a pit stop.
That's right.
He did do the thing that annoys me more than anything, which is he just overpromised. If he had gone there for a short time and left, probably wouldn't have irritated me so much. It was the fact that he was like, "I'm never leaving. I'm gonna be here for a decade." He didn't say it exactly like that. He's also a weird Southern dork, which has nothing to do with the conversation.
Well, at least his accent's real, though. Unlike, some people who go to programs in the South and then all of a sudden,
who do you want to name?
They're good Catholic boys from they're good Catholic boys from Boston, born and raised.
I got your family right here.
I got a great story for you. I don't know if I should share it on the podcast, but I got a great story for you about that.
All right, so we'll get to that off air because we don't want to defame anybody. But no, I mean, I actually do think Eli's done a really nice job there at Missouri. And, I actually do think in a weird way it matters. You had said it's less about wins and losses. I don't think it's weird because I think we've just gotten to the point where because the bowl games, we see through them and guys opt out. And, the teams on the field are very rarely the teams that we saw through the regular season. Those are all very real criticisms of the bowl game and how those games have been devalued. I think when you're coming off the kind of loss that you were with, was it 12 or 13 guys in the portal right now, with uncertainty at quarterback, with the idea that Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming could be going to a Big Ten rival at Nebraska, all these different things. I think it's just okay to say a win kind of optically looks like you went out at your best. And it looks like, hey, that team didn't give up on Ryan. Because to me, a win says, all right, it's not the kind of win you'd like, but it in some ways it stabilizes. And I think the only downside is if Missouri just kicks the holy crap out of you.
Yeah.
And I don't see that happening because I think your backups in that are going to be playing are in some cases as good as their starters because you're still Ohio State. But I think those two things matter.
I also just think too, this is an opportunity. I mean, think about Marvin Harrison Jr.'s sort of burst and rise to stardom. It started in a bowl game that wasn't a college football playoff game. It started in the Rose Bowl that first year he was there. And after that, it was, just this rocketing trajectory to being the player that he is now, a Heisman finalist, likely top 2 to 3 pick in the NFL draft. So getting somebody like maybe Carnell Tate has a really big game with whoever's starting a quarterback. Like, this is a chance for us to kind of get a sense of this next crop of talent and stars that are coming in and what this thing's going to look like with them and who's going to maybe seize the moment that we need to keep an eye on. But and I do think your point is sound because, I made that argument for Kevin Stefanski the last couple of years. Like, is the team quitting on him? Then yeah, maybe they need to move on from him. But I think if Ryan Day gets the most out of his team, if they're motivated, if they feel like they're not just going to throw in the towel because it's not as important of a game as the college football playoff that they were hoping for, then I do think that's pretty telling to his sort of footing in the program as well. And that's almost the most egregious thing that can happen. If you lose a locker room, if you lose the guys in the locker room and they stop believing in you, which I guess some people might make the case that that's already happening with the number of guys who have entered the portal. Like that's a chance for him to sort of stop the bleeding and prove, no, I'm still here and people still believe in this thing. And we got this train moving in the right direction.
All right, guys. So we do have a big week coming up. Later this week, we will be talking about coaching staff adjustments that could happen after the bowl game, maybe even before the game, maybe a Ryan Day adjustment that could happen going into next year. We're also going to be taking a good look at what's going on in the portal and recruiting, hoping to have a special guest for that. So be on the lookout on Friday. We will drop the next episode of Sons of the Shoe podcast. As we continue to beg, please make sure to follow us on all the different platforms there, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to download us as well. And, of course, make sure to hit the follow on the 92.3 The Fan YouTube channel as well. But that does it for another successful edition of the Sons of the Shoe podcast. Hit us with your feedback at Nick Wilson Says, at Spencito_. We actually are the kind of hosts that will interact with you on social media. So let us know your thoughts on today's podcast. Until then, guys, Spence, go Bucks.